Hey there, my name is Ryan.
And I'm Joel.
In this video, we are going to do the top 10 games that we wish we could play more.
Like, maybe the player count's hard to get to the table, or the theme just doesn't work, or you just don't really have the right group of friends and family right now to play that game. Let's jump into it.
Who's going first?
You.
I'll go first. Okay, so if you are a gamer, this will get the most hate of anything on my list. And you know what I'm going to say here. I think my number 10 game is a really lame card game, Sergeant Major. It's literally you.
This is not a board game.
No, but do you have any other card games on your list? See. Anyway, so what this is that you play with the deck of cards. It's an old game. You play with the deck of cards. Basically, it's like one of those old trick-taking games. Kind of like, I don't really play the other ones. I think Euchre, Pinochle, but it's a lot simpler. And you just are. What's interesting is if you are a board gamer. What's cool about it is it's asymmetric. The person who is the dealer has more cards and they have more power than everyone else. The second place person has less power and the third place person has the least. But you have asymmetric goals as well. So the person who dealt needs 8. If they get 9, they're +1. But they get 7, they get -1. The third place person could only get 4, but they only needed 3. So it's just kind of unique. Really the main reason I like it. No one else in my life likes this game. Literally
no one.
But the reason I like it, if all you have is a deck of cards and 3 players, literally people sit around and say, hey, do you want to play this? Oh, that doesn't work 3 players either. Oh, I want to play this. And then you try to play some game that should be 2 or 4 and make it work for 3, and no one's really ever happy because if you have a deck of cards, you should just play Sergeant Major.
No one's happy when you play Sergeant Major.
No, you should. It's an old game. It's not something you buy a deck of cards and you look up the rules online. It's super simple, and it actually was a card game that works with 3 players. So I wish I could play it more. If I played this game 50 times, I probably never want to play it again in my life, but I never get to play it. So I wish I could play it at least some, and no one else likes it. So there's my I'm a loser one for the list. So on to you.
We're off to a rough start.
I know. Everything you say now looks really good.
My number 10 is Canasta. And it's not.
It's not.
All right. My number 10 is Fury of Dracula / Letters from Whitechapel. So they're basically the same game. What's really unique about these games is that they're one versus many games, which I haven't played a whole lot of other than these 2 games. They're really fun. When you are playing Dracula or Jack the Ripper in Letters from Whitechapel, you're on the run. And you have your own unique set of moves. You're invisible on the board. And when you're on the other side, when you're the chasers in these games, you work the whole game and you narrow the regions down more and more. So it's this big game of hide and seek where you're chasing this person down. It works really well. Everyone has unique movements, and it's only game I really know that you really have this really in the dark feeling the whole time as the chasers. You're looking around, but you really hardly ever know. You like pick up a clue here, then you pick up a clue somewhere else, and you're just like, okay, you're trying to figure out his path, where he's going around. So, really great games. They're really hard to get to the table, first of all, just because they're long. Fury of Dracula, it takes about 3 hours. Letters from Whitechapel is a little shorter, maybe around 2.
Yeah, still long.
And Letters from Whitechapel, it's just hard to get to the table because the theme is just a little heavy. It's based on Jack the Ripper. It's not super fun. So, I like to just ignore the theme when I play the game because the mechanics are really fun. Just jump in. You're being chased by the police. It's a fun theme. So
yeah, the first time I remember playing these games and you're just like, you could be the bad guy and you're just in a space and everyone around the table is all trying to get you and they could be standing on your space and they're like, should I do an investigate here? And you're just like, they don't know how scared you are and you're terrified. Like if the game is over, but they're really fun games. But yeah, they're also the right crowd. Not everyone wants to play that. They're intense board games.
Yeah.
All right, so my number 9 is much more of a board game because there's actually a board.
There's only one way to go from that one.
And there's more. There's also a tree.
Oh.
Everdell is my game. It has a giant tree in the middle. It's this game that worker placement, so you have these workers, and you're putting them out on spots on the board and say, I want to do this. I'm going to get some berries. But it also has in front of you, you have cards you're playing. So you're like, okay, I'm going to put this card in front of me that lets me, every time I get a berry, I get an extra berry, which is pretty cool. And so you're kind of building like this, almost like they're called engine building, kind of combined with the placing workers, where your engine, by the end of the game, you're like, I'm going to place this card here, which gives me a bonus wood, which also lets me build this tower here. But it has some unique things about it. It also has, you go to the next season, but not everyone has to go to the next season. There's like time travel. Just not the theme, but it feels like time travel. Because not everyone has to go to the next season at the same time. So it has some unique things in it.
What I love about Everdell is it maybe more than any other worker placement game that I've played, you start out feeling really weak.
Mm-hmm.
You're like, you do like one really puny action, and you're looking at all these cards. You're just like,
I can't ever buy anything.
I'm never gonna buy a card. But by the end of the game, most of the time I've played, you kind of just choose when you're gonna end because you're so powerful. You can just keep buying and changing cards.
It's a really, really popular game. I just personally know people around me that want to play it, so I think, I played a handful of times. I'd love to play a few more. So, what you got?
All right, you're gonna love my number 9. So, I'm a pretty passionate hater of all things card games.
Canasta?
Oh, my favorite. It is the exception. I don't like card games a whole lot. However, you introduced me to one. You know what it is. It's light.
Fort.
No. This is a card game called The Crew. What's really interesting about The Crew is it's the only trick-taking game I've ever played that you're on a team. You're all on the same side trying to accomplish some mission card that you've drawn. But what makes the game super interesting is while you're playing, you need to make sure you're not taking or taking certain tricks, which is similar to other trick-taking games, but they're for your whole team. So what you're trying to communicate through, you're kind of given some rudimentary ways to communicate. They're kind of like, they don't let you give the whole picture. You can't be like, I have the 7.
It is, yeah. It's hard to just explain until you get into it, but then sometimes you play a blue 7 and everyone goes, oh, I played a blue 7. And you're like, no, I'm playing the blue 7 to tell you, I need the blue 6, but I wouldn't play the blue 7 unless you know I had the blue 6. It's weird because once you play a couple turns, you start figuring everyone out.
I would say if you're like me and you think card games are garbage, imagine if card games were fun. And that's The Crew.
Okay, this is really funny because we're doing our top board games. I mean, that's not like board games, but somehow we didn't talk about this. We would not have done this on purpose. So we're doing a lot of card games. So my number 8 is actually a card game too. And it's some version, you can call it whatever you want, of Werewolf or Mafia. I mean, I tend to think of Mafia. But it's just that really classic, like, I like that if the group is right. But you have to have a big group of people who have to be okay with killing each other in the game. And who have to be up for, like, kind of that narrative. Because if you play these games and someone's just kind of like, all right, let's figure this out, we vote you off, it's no fun. You have to get really into it and just, like, laugh and joke and pick on people and have a good time. And it just, I don't know, I have all these nostalgic feelings of this game. And you just never get to play. Because if you're with people who might like the game, they want to play something bigger. If you're with, like, 10 family members, they probably aren't okay with, like, the game for the most part. Your typical family gathering. So, I don't know. I think it's fun. My other games are all going to get a lot bigger after these opening ones. But especially, like, I just have good memories of Mafia. It's just hardly ever get to play it, so.
All right. My number 8 is...
A card game?
It's a deck building game.
Okay.
So, this one's a little out there. And most people I don't think will ever be familiar with this. But this is a deck building game we got to play as kids way before I knew anything about board games called Epic Duels. And I don't really know that it's the greatest deck building game. It may just be like childhood nostalgia creeping in, but it's really fun. It's Star Wars. So that also gave it a lot of points. Just play as Star Wars and you got to have battles with any mix of characters you want. You could do a movie battle or, Luke Skywalker could go kill Mace Windu. That could be the fight, right? In the Emperor's throne room, right?
Do you ever buy new cards?
No.
So it's probably
It's not
more
really
just,
a deck building game.
Sometimes you have things like search your deck for something, but yeah.
It's more like a collectible card game without the collecting element. It's hard to get to the table because it's not an easy game to teach someone who doesn't play any games.
Right.
And then it's also, I don't know, it's old. We don't bring it out. We're often just excited by new stuff, I think. So, but I love it.
Yeah.
It's a really fun game.
Okay, on to number 7. Now I'm talking about a big game. This is actually an old game. Well, I would say the oldest game on my list, but I put Sergeant Major on my list. So other than really ancient games, this is probably the oldest game on my list, and it's our train game. Talking about nostalgia. Rail Baron? Rail Baron.
Oh.
So
yeah.
if you were like, Ticket to Ride, started train games, you're wrong. You're very wrong. Rail Baron is, I don't even know if it's the best train building game, but it has, you're basically your trains, you're trying to move across the country, you have a lot of randomness, you're rolling for destinations, so you roll a dice and say, oh, I have to go to New York, or I'm in New York and I have to go to Philadelphia, and you have like a table that tells you how much money you get for the trip, but as you get money, you start buying up the tracks, and the nations basically split up into the historical tracks, which, our dad was like, oh yeah, the whatever, that was built. And I was like, I don't know. But basically, they have their original names and everything. You have like, you actually buy up like a railway, what don't you even call though? Mogul. And you're trying to buy up all the tracks.
Like a railway company.
Yeah, and you're trying to connect them. So you can connect certain tracks. You can ride on your own tracks. You pay a certain amount of turn. If you to ride on your opponent's tracks, you pay them 5 times as much. So you're trying to connect the cities you need to go to. I think it's weird, it's really old, and you would think that a game would have done this better by now. But I think for me, it's just a sweet spot between, it's a lot more complicated than Ticket to Ride, but I know there are train games out there that I have never touched that people warn me about. And they're just like, these are huge games, and I don't have to learn a giant game. This game it's not too complicated, and it just kind of hits that sweet spot, and it has the nostalgia, and you're building up tracks. Not just like, I'm putting this track here, but you're like, I want to buy that one. So you kind of have these big moments where someone's like, they don't know how much money they have, and they're like, I'm buying the big, whatever, Southern Pacific or whatever, that spans the whole, like, southern part of the country, and you're like, oh, now I can't go to Phoenix anymore. I have to pay you to go to Phoenix. So I think it's pretty fun.
Yeah. I think what's really cool, it has, like, the buying and then using someone else's property costs more, like Monopoly. But because it's not just random where you're rolling, you can buy anything on the board that you can afford.
Right.
It becomes, rather than being just random like Monopoly, it's really strategic because you're trying to look at where your opponent's going and hopefully try to lock them into riding on your railroad. Because once you start getting ahead in money, it can kind of snowball, and then you can take the game. My number 7 is a game I have played once.
With me?
Nope.
Okay.
And I would love to play it more. It's a big game. Comes in a big green box.
Oh.
It's all about running electric companies. It's called Power Grid.
Gotcha.
It's really cool. It gives me almost a bit of a Ticket to Ride vibe from how you're building out your electrical lines, basically. But you're also having this element of producing power. And it's fun. It's strategy. There's a little bit of luck mixed into it. But I would love to play it. It's really hard to find the right group. We can't just play it together. It doesn't play 2. It doesn't only play 3. So you gotta find a group of 4. You gotta have 2 friends. It's just impossible.
No, I'm laughing because when you first got this game before you tried it, there were so many times that we would like be hanging out and it'd be like getting late, and it's like, I don't want to do.
Let's just play Power Grid.
Let's play Power Grid. We would take it out and start opening the box, and one would see 3 and up. And we put it away, and then literally like 2 months later, we were like, we should learn Power Grid. We are taking it down. It's like, I think that happened 3 times, and I was like, I'm going to play Power Grid. I've never played. And then I went, crash. Like, you can't play Power Grid. Yeah, maybe it's also not the best looking box, which some people are kind of like, do you want to play this game? And some people are probably like, you see Everdell sitting there. People are like, how about we play that?
I mean, it's ugly.
Though I shouldn't say Everdell. That
negates my list. They really went for like the 30s aesthetic, you know?
Is that their excuse? Here's our artwork. 30s?
It exists.
It exists.
It exists. Well,
all right.
Shall we move on?
Let's move on. All right, so we're on to number 6. Now, I picked this game. I thought there would be no way that you would pick it.
The Crew?
But you did. No.
Oh.
Epic Duels.
Really?
Yeah.
Are you serious?
I was like, you know what? I didn't want my list to all be like... Cause it's easy to pick a new game that you played once. Like, I have a couple games I just played once at someone's house. And that'd be fun to play again.
Yeah.
But I really didn't want the whole list just become like, here's a new game that I tried once. I wish I could try it again. Because there's a lot of those. I mean, I could just... That'd be a big list.
All the cards... Most movie games have this, but I think it works well because Star Wars is so iconic. All the cards pretty much are titled some famous line, like that one, like, I will not fight you from the movie, or like, I am your father's a card, right? And so I think it like adds some charm.
Yeah.
Because like, you're like playing like Anakin and you're like, I hate sand. That one's not in there. But it's just like some ridiculous like... Let's move on to my number 6. I think this will come as no surprise to you. This is a game I got for you a couple years ago. It's an abstract strategy game called Santorini.
Boom.
Santorini's cool. You can play, like the first 10 times we played, you can play this game just raw strategy. There are these other powers, which I think do improve the game a lot. But you could just play your 2 workers. Every turn you move and you build. And that's the whole game. That's the whole strategy. Your goal is to get to the 3rd level of a building. So you need to construct a building that's 3 levels high. Every turn you can move and you can only walk up 1 level. It's the whole game. You can play the whole game. It's a whole game of blocking each other, trying to stop the person from reaching it. But then after you play the game, they are hero powers and they're wild.
Yeah.
They completely change the game. Like sometimes it's like you can't build when you're next to this person.
Yeah.
Or this person builds twice when they build, or they can build underneath them, which normally you're not allowed to.
Right.
So you end up spending the whole game, you're like, okay, this is the move, and you're like, wait, his power is now that he can build under him, or he can build twice, so I gotta be careful. So it's a brilliant game. We have gotta play it, but I could always play more of it. It's just it's an amazing game. I think it's really fun. I've yet to play through like all the characters.
Yeah, me neither. There's so many.
So
There's
I
30.
just feel like we could just keep cycling. Every combination is going to make for a completely different game.
Right. My number 5 is a deck building game, which is what you said the one was earlier, but you was wrong.
It's not a deck building game.
The more I sit here, I'm like, I was trying not to be rude, but I'm like,
I know.
No. Anyways, mine is a deck building game, and it's Fort.
The hardest, most complicated board game ever made. Please continue.
Fort, yeah, it is. Fort is a deck builder, meaning that you have a hand of cards, and every card has its own thing it does. And then as the game goes along, you're going to be picking up new cards and adding them to your hand. Once you play your hand, you put it in a pile over here, and you go through all your cards. You start with 10. Once you go through all 10 cards, you probably picked up a few more, so there's 11 in there. You shuffle and put them on your left side, and you deal 5. So you could get a new one, maybe next turn you will. Then you pick up cards. As the game goes along, you're trying to get good cards and also good combination of cards. Maybe you have a card that says, do this if you have in Fort a pizza, and then you have that. I have a pizza card, so I'm going to get this card to combine with that. So what makes Fort interesting is the cards are insane. They do really wacky things. Every card is like not every card, like there's 2 of each copy, but there's a lot of different cards. They're all in play. You steal whatever you want. There's not a price. You just take whatever card you want to. But your kid's building a fort, and you're trying to collect pizza and toys and have the coolest fort. The reason it doesn't get to the table enough is it's too complicated probably for the presentation. It looks really cute and fun. The first time I taught him, it was 2 o'clock in the morning.
I don't know if I've ever been more confused playing a game.
He cried.
You just explained the rules, and I don't remember any of that happening.
He cried.
That's not true. However, I was just like, I remember you would do your turn, and it would get to me, and I would just
do it. You would go, what?
I was just like, okay.
Okay, so it ends up being complicated because you give a card that says, oh, I'm going to play this. I'm also going to enforce it with this. But my guy put in my lookout earlier. Remember the lookout? He's going to make it a stronger action. But I'm also going to discard my 2 best friends so you can't steal them. But it's just in that weird, it looks like it comes in a box like this big. It looks easy, but it's not. So you're not going to get played very often because you trick people into playing it. They're not going to like you anymore.
The way I look at it, if your IQ's under 200, play Dominion. Over 200, Fort.
Yeah.
All right, I feel like my number 5 is a little lame, but it had to be on here. My number 5 is one of my favorite games, Cosmic Encounter.
Boom.
Cosmic Encounter
Oh.
is...
That should be on my list too. I didn't put it on there.
Let's replace Sergeant Major. I'm going to let you do your edit.
Hey, my number 10 is Cosmic Encounter. I have a feeling Joe will have it later on his list, so I'm not going to talk about it right now. I thought about a card game, but I didn't put it on.
Cosmic Encounter. Cosmic Encounter, I don't know what genre to call it because I really just don't know what to call it. Cosmic Encounter is a game where every turn you're going to...
Space.
You're going to have an encounter on someone... It's actually on someone's planet, I guess. So your goal is to have 5 planets conquered, right? So every turn you're going to have the opportunity to conquer an opponent's planet. So you'll draw a card that'll tell you which planet you're going to conquer, and you're going to put ships on to attack them, and then you'll be able to ask for alliances from anyone else at the table. So for example, I may draw Ryan to attack him, I'll attack one of his planets. At that point I can say, does anyone want to ally with me? And they can add ships to the battle, and we could all team up to try to take him out. Ryan can also accept allies to help him defend. What makes the game go from like kind of okay mechanics that would be fine, like good, to just spectacular for me is you have a hero power. Starting from the first time I played the game, like 6-7 years ago, like to now, every time I play the game, I look at my 2 hero powers, and you have this like grin inside for me. I'm like, I'm gonna win. Like this power is crazy.
Yeah.
It's gonna be so good. And then without fail, everyone else feels that way. They have a crazy power too. It's not super hard to get to the table. It does require 3. It's not very good with 3. I would say it's 4+, which makes it a little harder.
I've played it 3 or 4 times.
Mm-hmm.
Always with 3 players, and I'm always like, Sorry. And that's what we've talked about. That's why it's on my list, because I'm like, man, I feel like this game would be a lot more fun if it had another person, because it feels like someone's always picking on someone, like 2-1 a lot. All right. Number 4, I know I'm going to steal Joel's thunder, so I'm not going to talk about this much. I have to be stealing your thunder. Battlestar Galactica. So I'm just going to leave it at that, because I know we're going to talk about this later.
Okay, my number 4.
Excuses.
It's 3 games. But to me, they're all. I would say I only wrote down 2. 2 of them are basically the same for me, and I might just change depending on the group I'm with. And those games are Mysterium Obscurio.
Okay.
And you could throw Dixit in there too.
Yeah.
If you haven't played one of these, they're great. I love them because they play a lot of players and a few number really well, and you can teach them really quickly. So the whole concept of both these games, they play out a little differently, is that one person plays the person who basically knows the key to win the game. The one is like a clue style person, weapon, place. And then the other one's just a little different. It's a library. But one person knows the key, and they have to give clues to all the other players to help lead them to the right answers. But you can't speak as the ghost. We're always loose on speaking, but you're not allowed to give them...
I
you
never
can't
speak. I play by
them.
the rules.
That's true. But you have cards. You have a very limited amount of cards, and you need to give, and they all have crazy abstract imagery, which is really what makes it a game, right? It's just having like all these options, and you need to pass any number of cards you want to a player and try to lead him. So I might be trying to lead him to the dining room. I'm like, well, and you're looking at your cards like, I got an ocean, and you give him the ocean, he's like, ocean. He's got to be talking about this room because there's a boat in the background.
Or
and
the
you're
person
like,
beside you
no.
goes, that's not an ocean, it's actually the beard of the wizard. And you're like, oh no, it was a beard of a wizard, but it looks like an ocean too. This is really fun. We have so many moments where you give, like, me and we get along well. We know each other. So many times I'll like hand Joe a card and be like, and he'll be like, I have no clue what this means, but I feel like it's the race car driver. And I can't say anything, so I'm just kind of like, yeah, we got this. And like all 3 people are like, no, you see this little detail? And I'm just like, don't do it, Joe. Why can't you get to the table?
So, I can... The first one's harder. I think it's a little harder, the theme. It's got this ghost theme where you're doing...
Mysterium?
Yeah. It's got this ghost theme where you're doing a seance. Honestly, I don't even explain the themes when I teach these games anymore. But I do find this...
I don't think I even understood quite that was a seance.
It doesn't really matter. Like,
just
the
a
games
ghost, and I think are
like deeply thematic in that sense.
Yeah.
It's hard. I find that it's just hard to get a group that wants to sit down and play it.
Yeah.
So we get to do it sometimes as like just us or as a family. But like getting like to sit down with a group to play it, I find that it's a harder. For some reason, it's just a little less tangible than something like I could teach like Pandemic or a game like that. It's a little more tangible. Like, here's your actions. These are just a little more like getting cards around. I don't know.
Yeah.
I've had some success teaching it, but not quite as much as I would like to. And it's also part of it's just I love this and I can always play more.
All right. So number 3 is, I think of everything on the list, the only game that you might not know anything about, other than maybe me mentioning it before. I think you know the least about this game, and I won't keep it a secret and do a big reveal. El Grande.
I've heard it.
Okay. I've gotten to play it a couple times. So you're trying to take control of spaces in Spain. You take your people, and you can just decide where you want to go. But when you put your people out there, what you're trying to do is get majority. But I think what really have you tried it before?
No.
Okay, what makes it unique is there are 5 cards across the top. And these 5 cards, basically, if you choose this one, if I could be slightly wrong on the details, but one card lets you put the most troops out. So this will let you put 5 troops out. But this one lets you do 4, 3, 2, 1. But in order, they have all just unique powers. There's a whole stack of 5s that will all be worse cards than the 1s. You only get to put 1 troop out, but it has the coolest bonus. So you might I put 4 troops out, and I got to swap 2. But then the 1 might be, we'll put 1 troop out, but then restock your thing, or put 1 troop out, and then totally delete someone else's troops off a region. And I don't know if that's one of the cards, but it kind of has that effect. So it's complicated enough. Where we sit down to play the game, okay, so you want majority, but you can't just put things out there. You got to pick one of the 5 cards. When you pick one of the 5 cards, that lets you do your action. When you score, 3 times a game, you'll score. And if you have, you'll just go through the list and say, okay, who has a majority in, I don't remember what the regions, if they're cities or their state or province's name. But basically, if you have the majority of that region, you score. So in that sense, it's simple. But you are just really playing your odds and your numbers and saying like, okay, I got 7 there and you got 5. If I move the king away from that region, or if you put the king in that region, no one can place anyone there, so you're locked in that zone. So it has a lot of depth and strategy for being an older game. So I like it, but I hardly get to play it.
I wish I could add something to that, but
You don't know
I
the
just
game,
am
so.
unfamiliar.
Number
entirely.
3 for
Number
you.
3, as already mentioned by you,
Oh.
Battlestar Galactica.
Oh, yeah. I thought this would be number 1 for you.
Yeah, I'll make it fast. Battlestar Galactica is great. It's a cooperative
Alright,
game.
that's it.
You're all on the same team. It's a survival game, and it might do the survival element, like feeling like you're just hanging on by a thread, better than any game I've ever played. The gameplay's pretty simple. You're trying to survive. Every game you're given a new crisis given by the game, and you're playing against it. And you have to band together to try to put in cards which add up to so many points to pass the crisis. You can always...
Every round.
Every
You
round.
said every game. Every
Sorry,
round.
Every round of the game.
I was like,
And
I thought I knew this game.
there's a little more to it. You move around. There's a big battle going on out, like a ship battle, around your battleship, around the Battlestar, and well, not the Battlestar, but
Battlestar.
there's that going on. But the twist is, want to use evil, and you may not even know when you're evil. You could start the game good and later
Right.
become evil in the game. So you may all be working together for the first half of the game, and then after that, one person or two, depending on your player count, will become evil. It makes the best tension of any trader mechanic I've ever played. Something like Resistance is excellent. I love Resistance, but it doesn't, like, the stakes are lower because you just pop up with another round of Resistance and you're good. But Battlestar is like a 2-hour epic of, like, everything you do is barely hanging on survival,
Right.
trying not to use any fuel, let people die, lose any morale. And, like, when that person, like, messes something up, you're just like, ugh. So, it's hard to know. You can kind of add up cards to, like, try to deduce
Right.
who it is, and there is, like, ways you could do it. But it's one of my favorite games ever. And it's hard to get to the table because it's really long.
Really long.
It's heavy. I don't think it's the heaviest game in the world, but it's just heavier than what most people are going to want to play in general.
On my list too, because I totally agree.
There's always big decisions to make, and both sides can look good or bad to your
Yeah.
decision. Always. So, it's
a good
fantastic.
Game. You need to play more. I haven't played enough, so.
What's your number 2?
My number 2 is probably the heaviest game on my list. Yeah, it's like the biggest, most intense one. Kitchen Rush.
Okay, I was going to say, like, oh boy. Because
Okay.
mine's so light.
Kitchen Rush. So you're in a kitchen, and there's little spots you go to, like, oh, I need to seat a guest. I'm going to go to this spot, and I put that guest in front of me. I took their order. I need to get plates. I'm going to pick the plates up, and I'm going to go to the storage and get the food out. Now I'm going to go with my little, you have these little people you put in there, I'm going to go cook the food. That all sounds very simple and boring, and it would be, but you have 4 minutes, and your people are not people, but they're sand timers, which I guess for board gamers, when you hear sand timer in a game, you immediately think, I hate this game.
It's
Like
so
sand
bad.
timer. But then what's brilliant is, especially with 3 or 4 players, you're all doing it at the same time. And if you don't finish an order, you get a negative. So it is like, again, chaos in a great way. You feel like you're really in a kitchen. People yelling at you, and they're like, we gotta get those burgers on. You're like, this person told me to do this. And you're like, but so in this game, you're just like, you know you have to fill this order. And you know your team will struggle if you don't get this order done because you need the money to pay your workers. But then someone else is also filling that, and they choose to cook in the oven. You're like, get off the oven! And you don't get the timer. There's 14 seconds. Like, I think the timer went out in time first. Well, I'm gonna go here and shop, and I'll do this. I'll go to the store. Then, like, you know, it's just, it's utter chaos in the best way. So, the reason it's hard to play, I think when I've taught it to people, it's really fun. People are laughing, but everyone ends it and goes like, wow.
And it kind of like going on people's spaces gives you that, like, oh, we're bumping into each other in the kitchen because we're unorganized. And like the better you communicate, it's cool because like you realize the better you communicate, the better you get at the game.
Right.
So like, oh, it's actually pretty realistic. You know, if you start communicating like what you're doing, if you're gonna shop, if you're gonna buy something, like it's perfect.
What do you got?
All right, my number 2. Dark Overlord. I love
Oh, hey, Sergeant Major is now number 12. Right behind Dark
Okay.
Overlord and Cosmic Encounter.
Dark-
Oh, I forgot about this.
Dark Overlord.
I-A-Y-E.
Dark Overlord. Dark Overlord. It's a game with basically no rules.
It's not a game, it's an experience.
It's really...
Beautiful experience.
It's one of those games, every time I've played, I've left crying out of laughter. It's insane. So, how it works, one person plays the Dark Overlord, and everyone else plays minions.
Me, I'm the Dark Overlord.
The minions have just failed a mission that the Dark Overlord will come up with. And they are trying to pass blame to each other. So, it is a kind of fast-paced talking game. You have some cards that help you direct your story you need to use. They're not the most important thing. But basically, you're trying to tell your story like, oh, Dark Overlord! I was going through the mountain, but he took me away! He got distracted drinking in the barn! So you're passing the blame, but if ever you like get lost in your own story or contradict or just say something rude or the Dark Overlord just hates you, he can give you a withering stare. You can be withered in the stare. I don't know what to say. You can be withered in a stare for 3 times. You'll probably lose. There is like a way out, but it's not like a game you want to like. You're kind of breaking the rules. It's don't play with that kind of person. It is laugh your head off. Like
it's hilarious.
You need to come in. If you're the Dark Overlord, put a cloak over your head.
I have. Make
crazy voices. Like just embrace the weird. The insanity of it. It's a beautiful game.
Yeah.
The reason it's hard to get to the table is...
it's narrative.
I almost put Snake Oil here instead, actually, because for kind of the same problem. Not everyone likes make-believe, I've found. I think we are really into it, so I was so surprised. Like, some people are just like, I don't want to just, like, make up things and try to be funny. Yeah. And, like, I'm like, pressure. Oh, okay.
Why not?
For you, I'm like, that's just my whole existence is just saying something weird.
His whole existence is making up stuff.
Making up lies.
All right. Number 1. I think the harder part for me was not putting the games into this list, but ordering them. So I felt a little weird putting this number 1 because I've played it more than most games on this list, but it's definitely one I want to play more. And it's a game that you've already mentioned twice, which made me very uncomfortable, but it's not on your list. You've mentioned it.
Snake Oil?
Twice. No. Did you mention that twice?
I don't know.
The Resistance.
Oh, yeah.
But I haven't got to play it as much as you. You're given a role. You are the traitor, or you are not the traitor, you're the Resistance, and you're trying to find the other Resistance players on the table. You don't know who they are. If you can figure out who the Resistance players are, you can send them on missions together. Their missions are going to pass. So basically, it's really simplified. It's just like, how good can you bluff if you're one of the bad guys? You're trying to convince. Typically, the Resistance are the people who are talking. They're like, "Hey, are you good or whatever?" And so it has some of this like you could put in a card and pass a mission even though you're bad. But it really just comes down to how good are you at tricking people. So some of the best experiences in this game are the ones where someone's like, "Hey, I don't know who's good or bad, but Ryan, I know I can trust you," and you're just like, like you just know you're going to crush him. Yeah, I don't know if it's really my number 1. I really struggle with the ranking of these top few, but
I think it's a perfect number 1. It's a perfect game. I would never say no to playing Resistance. So
yeah, that's how
maybe
I feel
it should have been on my list. Although these games are all I would love to play. I don't know. I was feel like I don't crave to play it because I do get a lot of opportunities. But I would never say no.
What do you got? Number 1.
All right, you got to guess.
Sheriff.
No.
Is it Kitchen Rush?
No. It's Fog of Love.
Okay.
This is an unexpected, favorite of mine. I never, I really was iffy on getting it, and I was with a friend. They were really like, this looks amazing. I was like, okay, whatever, so we got it. And it has been an unexpected, I've never had a bad experience. Fog of Love is a game where you play 2 people in a relationship. You pick some things about yourself, but then you're given some traits, and they're not often good. So you might be a really impatient person.
Wobbly legs.
Yeah, like wobbly legs. You might be, or just ugly, or or like I'm like really impatient. And then the whole game, there's not like a lot of deep mechanics. The whole game is basically reading an event off a card and deciding what you're gonna do.
Right.
Sometimes it's more like aligning with what the other person thinks, but sometimes it's just like in character, like. It's, I might be impatient, for example, like I said. And then we might get a card that's like, your partner's really winding you up and they keep nagging you and nagging you and nagging you. Like, do you want to, have patience and give them a hug, or do you want to, lose it? And, you're like, oh, obviously I should, have patience, if I want to win. But you're like, well,
right.
John is an impatient man.
Right. Yeah,
You're
yeah.
like,
I played a character. It wasn't snarky, but it was a word like that. Just like, cynical. And I think I was like, my 3 traits were like cynical, bitter, and something else negative. And like partway through the game, Joe was like, I'm going to get a drink of water. And I was like, fine. Like, he's like, what? I'm like, we just stopped a lot. And inside, I was like, man, I sound like a bad person. But then later, I was like, I couldn't help it. I was a bad person. And so you just have these great moments, like, or like your character's like positive. So we take it one step further. We just embody our character. Where the whole game, I'm going to be like snarky with you. And after a while, you're like, okay, this person, like, they're being mean because the card says to be mean. But yeah, it's crazy.
It's an amazing game. I think it's hard to get to the table. Again, not everyone's a make-believe kind of person.
No.
So you really have to be able to make-believe. It only plays 2.
Yep.
And you also kind of have to be in this like uncomfortable thing where like you're in a romantic relationship with this person, which isn't really for every pair.
All right, so Fog of Love and The Resistance are our top games. That's actually a pretty good list. One's 2-player and one's you have like need 6, but there's a top 10. Top 10 games that we wish we could play more. Any final thoughts?
Nope. Thank you so much for checking this video out. Drop it a like down below and hit subscribe for more videos.
See ya.